Good evening. My name's Marilyn Walton. I'm the Associate Dean International, and I'm in the School of Public Health, but the Associate Dean International is responsible for medicine, nursing, pharmacy and dentistry. And tonight I have some of my colleagues here who you'll meet Rhonda next, but Jason Dibbs and Fiona Tin, would you like to stand up? They're our colleagues in the Office for Global Health who look after you. Jason does the incoming students who come from other countries to Sydney, and Fiona looks after all of you who are travelling out. Bearing in mind, though, we only have around 55 placements that are organised through exchange relationships with our office, so it's incredibly competitive. And we have had a moratorium on developing new relationships, mainly just because the clinical schools are finding it very difficult to cope with all the incoming students that we have reciprocal relationships with. But next year we will introduce some placements in Myanmar and in Hasnaden University in Makassar, which is in Sulawesi. The Office for Global Health has three themes that it works around, and it's around research, and all of us have been just madly writing grants for saving lives through the Gates Foundation, through AusAid, in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, which has been a priority this year for us. We have capacity building around teaching and learning, and that's working with our colleagues overseas, and student exchange. And student exchange has a priority of the faculty. 2 years ago, the faculty at our retreat made a decision that every one of our students should have an international experience or an experience working in another culture. So it puts the focus on our office to try to facilitate that, and there are other colleagues working on that as well. This evening, we're very lucky that Global Home and Subs are sponsoring this evening. It's been sponsored by MDA Avant, who are both medical indemnity organisations, MIGA, MIPS and World the World, and I'm sure they will all have a brief opportunity to talk to you. I'm quickly just going to give you an overview of the office so you know who we are and what we're doing. It was established in 2007, but mainly now the medical faculty supports totally the Office for Global Health, and there's about 6 and 7 of us there. There's part-time people on research grants, there's other people who are working part-time, and we have an IT person who works with us. It's in the same floor as the Dean, so if you just keep going down the corridor and you walk into Edward Ford, you'll see us on the left, so please visit us. The door's closed, but it's often open, so please come in if you need to ask any questions. And I've already said that we have 55 placements. So every stage has some capacity for you to have an international placement, and only very recently the faculty has voted that even students who self-organise an elective are required to get approval from their clinical school, from the Associate Dean, or from the Sydney Medical School, from Michael Frommer or someone else if you're in stage 1 and 2. And this is precisely because you are not covered with insurance by the university if you don't have approval. So we've had to put in a system where we efficiently can do it without a lot of bureaucracy, but it's also better for you in terms of we know where you are, and most of you who go for an international placement will do so as Sydney University medical students. So you wouldn't be allowed in a hospital if you didn't have some credentials around who you are and where you come from. So it's really important we know that. So there's going to be a lot more effort put in by our office to record where you all go. And there's going to be some amazing places in Africa, in India, in Asia, and Europe. So this time next year, hopefully we'll have a list of where you all go. So there's the ILA, the Independent Learning Activity, and Dr. Bandler's here, and you'll be able to talk to her. There's the non-elective, which really means it's not an ILA and it's not an elective, and usually you do them in second year. And then there's stage 3 elective, which is a formal part of our course as an ILA is. So our partner institutions, they're all available on the web, but they're in Cambodia, Chile, China, 3 in China. Fudan, Peking and Shanghai Jiaotong are major universities in China. They're 3 of China 9. And our Sydney Medical School and the faculty has quite deepening relationships with both of those 3 institutions, where we do both research and we do student exchanges. The Christian Medical College in Vellore, the Delta Meaga Institute of Medical Sciences in India, Gudramadra in Indonesia, and as I said, next year we'll look at one at Hasnaden on Sulawesi. In Nepal, there's the Patton Academy of Health Sciences, Singapore, Thailand, and Timor-Leste. And the countries are those listed up there. You can just see them up there. So we're going to, as I said, there's been a moratorium, but we are looking to expand this list of countries that we deal with. But we have priority countries, and our priorities are India and China, Indonesia, Timor-Leste, the Mekong Delta, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. And we've added the Pacific, which now we will be negotiating this year, some Pacific placements. And we're starting to look at New Guinea, but we're not thinking of student exchanges in New Guinea at the moment. We're really looking at some research there with some of the hard-to-reach households in terms of healthcare. So the scholarships and prizes, you would all know, those who are interested, we have just finalised the scholarship process for the Dean's Scholarship. Now there are fewer and more money. Before there were a lot more scholarships but less money, and the money didn't really even cover an airfare. So we thought that the scholarship should revert to something that's meaningful to that genuinely help people financially. It's highly competitive, and as you know, it's all closed. And unfortunately, the university can't fund your electives, your international experience. So you will be asked by lots of us that are applying for an ILA or one of our partner countries, can you afford this? Because it's not a good look for us to have an exchange relationship where at the end of the year, none of our students actually can go because they can't afford it. So we really need to be thoughtful that and to make sure that you do know you can afford it, or if you can't, to let us know soon enough so we can make sure that place is filled. Scholarships and prizes, the Dean's Scholarship. We have the Dr. Carl Richard Jackson Scholarship, and Kathy Jackson interviews for that scholarship, and we interviewed some this morning for 2 placements in Cambodia, but our office will offer more placements than just the 2 scholarship places. We have 1 research scholarship, and we'd love to expand that to more research because a number of you are obviously keenly interested in doing some more research with different overseas facilities. So we'll put some energy into that to try and get some more research. Technion Society of Australian Scholarships, and we're interviewing for that Thursday or Friday, I think. And there's 2 placements there, up to 2 placements, each of $3,000. So the research one is $5,000 and the amounts are there. The application process is on the web. They've closed for this year. And so 2014 will be advertised early next year. And we do appreciate it's a very small time frame for you to get your heads around, particularly if you're really busy out at the clinical schools and in your stage 3. And indeed, even if you're in stage 1, it's all very new and you've got to remember or even know to go to the Office for Global Health. So we will talk at the office of how we can make this much more accessible to you. Some of the students previously in Global Health have been to see us to try and smarten up our website, make it a bit easier to negotiate and to get around in, and we're looking at that at the moment, as is the whole Sydney Medical School's website being reviewed. Now, that last bit, compulsory ethics, is not yet the case. It's a wish list for us, but it got stuck in some of the committee structures. Not because anyone didn't agree with it, but just because everyone was so busy that we hadn't decided of who was going to do it. But for the Office for Global Health, we are going to offer, in conjunction with Global Health, ethics sessions for you to come to. It will be voluntary though. And what it'll involve will be 90-minute sessions where we give you real cases and ask you get you to discuss and talk about how you're going to deal with this, because those of you who go to low-income countries sometimes will be placed in quite difficult positions where the knowledge and experience you require is beyond what you currently have. And how do you manage that? And how do you deal with the pressures from other people for you to do it? And how do you make sure that patients remain at the centre of care in really difficult environments? So Global Home will get back to you on that. So welcome everybody, and now I'll hand over to Rhonda, who is the Executive Officer for Hock My Foundation. Thanks, Rhonda.
Hello everybody. I can recognise some of your faces. I've just got Jason doing this for me. Okay, some of these photos you'll see are photos that have been taken by one of the students who went 2 years ago. She was a pretty good photographer. Some of you will know that the Hockmar Foundation has been part of the Sydney Medical School since 1997. So we've been around a long time. We do lots of things in Hockmar, not only offer students opportunities to study in Vietnam with their electives and their ILAs and their second year opportunities, but we run teaching programs in Vietnam as well. And also we bring people over from Vietnam to study here. John Fisher, these scholarships were renamed last year. John Fisher was one of the founding members of Hockmar, but he was killed in a light plane accident last year. So just in his honour, we now call the scholarships the John Fisher Hockmar Scholarships. We don't fund ILAs. We do fund second years and third years. The ILAs, I'm happy to organise, but there's a bit of a process, an internal process. I want you to come and see me to make sure you're committed to going if you want to do an ILA in Vietnam, and that's just between you and I. And then we organise it through the same process with all the other students. One of the things about Hockmar Fellow Scholarships are that they're multidisciplinary. We have a strong belief you can't run any healthcare without everybody being involved. So you go as a group. Second years go with nursing and allied health and dentistry. The scholarships are open to all clinical schools, but we do offer more to the Northern Clinical School, because the Northern Clinical School supports us really fully. We use the facilities for nothing, and it's just like a give back. Part of Hockmar is about giving back to each other. The applications open soon. They're advertised on the website, on our website, the Hockmar website, but also through the bulletin board. Now I say soon because all the Hockmar student scholarships are funded by donation. We're having a meeting next week to decide how many we're going to give. Our AGM was in March, and we just still have to make our final decision. So it's very competitive, but we really spend a lot of our money on the student scholarships, not just for medicine, obviously. Last year there was 31 people who went. The previous year there was 24. So it really does depend on what sort of funds we have available about how many people go. As I said, they'll be advertised on the website, the bulletin board, and a flyer goes to every clinical school. Once there's a selection criteria, obviously, and we get the application in, we cull. There's an essay people have to write. We cull on the essay. The academic lead for Hockmar Scholarships is Catherine Hawke, and she's an academic from Orange, Rural Clinical School. There's also a board member and myself. The benefits of a Hockmar scholarship is that we coordinate all the scholarships for you. We book the airfares, we coordinate the clinical placement, and we help for accommodation. We've been doing it a long time now, so it's pretty well sort of sorted. As I say, the clinical placements are definitely multidisciplinary, and there's a number of Ashleys around somewhere. There's a number of people that learn a lot about each other's profession just from the scholarship opportunity. The second year's scholarships and the nursing and allied health are all in the 1st of December to the 31st, because that's apparently when the second years can go, and the stage 3 guys can go whenever they can over that period of time. And the ILAs, if they're going, I encourage them to go with the second year group. If you want to find any further information, my colleague Jason will be here tonight, but our office is around the corner for an Office of Global Health, and we're there most days, every day. We're happy to, if you just pop in or send us an email. Popping in's quite nice because we like to see people in our office, and we've got a rather nice office with lots of photos around. So thank you for your time and good luck with your decisions.
Yeah, pull up just as I finish. I'll bring it home. Hi guys, my name is Ben. I'm from MDA National. You would have recognised some faces from the O-Day barbecue and also some global health drinks presentations that I did a couple of weeks ago. So MDA is a medical defence organisation that provides free student insurance during all your student years, as well as providing cover for scholarship placements, clinical electives overseas. So what we do is provide support from day one. So if you're study stress, electives is common, as I said, when going through those decisions. It's a 1-800 number and we're a phone call away to help you. We're an MDO, which is mutual, which is Doctors for Doctors since 1925. We have a national membership of around 35,000 members. Sure, we support over 50% of Australia's junior doctors. So with student policy, it's a free policy membership for you, free access to the Electives network, which will be Helena, and we've demonstrated to you guys outside on the iPad. Okay, we have 24-hour medico-legal advice, as well as benefits for the student need news, which can help you with case studies, homework. We have had feedback that it does help students. We have a Doctors for Doctors program, and we have a local support and also a national presence now. Many universities hold insurance policies, but as I said, they may not guarantee where you'll be being protected, so that's where medical defence may be there with a phone call away. Okay, it's important to know the breadth of coverage your university also provides, and that's where we can sometimes, at least if we're told, we can provide cover. Okay, so I'll get Helena up here to talk about 10. So this is a benefit when joining MDA. You get free access. It's done by so the reviews are done by students. So it's electives and hospitals all around Australia, and it is on an online basis. So it's always constantly updated. And also, if there's any questions at the end, or if you're not a member, as I said, you can sign up at the end, or any questions for me, just give them to me, and I can also send them to our Student Electives Network representative.
Yep. Hi guys, thanks for having us. So can I just get a show of hands, who's heard of the Electives Network? Did you find it useful? Yes, lots of nods, which is good. Okay, so as Ben mentioned, we've got a database of about 2,500 placements, about 4,000 feedback reports from students who have been to these places. We've got a funding database, we've got case studies, country profiles. We have staff who are on hand to answer your questions, and our database is updated weekly as well. So it's up-to-date, important information that you guys needed. Now I thought instead of telling you what we can do, I'd show you some of my favourite hospitals. Does anyone know where they want to go? Do a bit of a shout out? No? Okay. Audience participation. So one of my favourites is Gizo Hospital. Has anyone heard of Gizo? They have a really great elective program there. If you're into diving, this is the place for you. So you do a search for a hospital. We've got a photo of it, some information about the language, where it is, some hospitals that are nearby, because often if they're affiliated with a medical school, you can do your placement at a few different hospitals. Different departments that you can do your elective in. Tell me if I'm going too fast. On the ground, some more detailed information about accommodation, about teaching. This is the important one, how to apply. So we've got contact details for all of these placements. And lastly, student reviews. So you can go through and see how long in advance people have planned their elective, where they've stayed, what sort of teaching they had. Another one that I like. Mount Sinai. Has anyone been to New York? Yes. So Mount Sinai is a fantastic hospital. You find a lot of American universities will, American medical placements will ask that you have a USMLE, but we have quite a long list of elective placements that all take international students. So again, how to apply, we've got all the contact details, student reviews, with extra information about what you can expect while you're there. If you don't know where to start, a good place under our community tab is our case studies. So these are all electives that are a little bit different, a little bit special that we've liked. So you can read about students who've gone all over the world, gone to remote rural places. We've got one student who was in America for 9/11, working at the Chief Medical Officer's department, so he did a lot of forensics there. Someone who went to a prison in the UK, so there's lots of different options there. We also have links to ready-made electives, and Anita from Work the World is here and she'll tell you a lot more about that, but there are a lot of options for companies that will package up an elective for you, so they'll help you with accommodation, with flights, you'll be with other medical students. So essentially we're a one-stop shop, we're here to help. Ben is going to field any questions after presentations tonight, but you can always contact us as well. And we're a free service to all MDA National members, which most of you will be, and at the end of tonight, hopefully all of you will be. Okay, thanks.
Anything close? No.
That's the one. Oh, I hate that noise. All right, hi guys. Sorry I'm really loud. If I'm being too loud, I'll step back. I'm Sarah from Avant. We are the largest medical indemnity insurer in Australia and also the oldest. We're having a birthday this year and turning 120, which is pretty cool. So, a bit about Avant and why you need us. Your university, unfortunately, doesn't cover you for everything, which is totally fine, and that's where we step in. So we'll cover you for things like Good Samaritan Acts worldwide. If you're on a plane and someone calls out, is there a doctor? It's a scary possibility and could happen. We'll cover you for that kind of stuff. Any legal fees, disciplinary, if you're having a conflict with the university, obviously they're not going to cover you for that, and again, that's where we step in. Any criminal, coronial as well. So one thing which some of you already have, and I apologise for people who don't have it yet, but they are coming, is the Electives Guide. It's pretty much like a Lonely Planet book, which you guys would have all seen if you've gone on holidays, but this is specifically for doing overseas placements as medical students. So it's pretty thick. If someone has it, you can hold it up and anyone who doesn't have it can have a look. But if you come out and see us at the end, the rest of the books should be here. One thing we have started this year, and this is the first year we've done it, is free travel insurance, as my subtle t-shirt tells you. This was an idea that came to us from our ASAC, which is our Student Advisory Council, and our DITAC. So they are Junior Doctor Council, and they said one thing that would be really helpful for students and young doctors is travel insurance, because you guys do a lot of placements. So what we've done for students, you guys get one trip per year, 30 days, anywhere you want to go in the world. So if you want to use it for your electives, is a great time to use it. The other thing, if you just want to go on a holiday and you want to go to Bali, we'll cover you for that as well. There are a couple of exclusions. It doesn't cover heli skiing for anyone who's really out there with their skiing, but it does cover regular skiing and snowboarding. So for all the normal people in the world, you're fine there. I would recommend anyone who is going overseas to take out travel insurance. I've actually experienced it firsthand and wasn't let into a hospital in America until I handed over my credit card. And $850 later, I had a blood test. So it's a really worthwhile thing. And if you can get it for free, so much the better. So anyone who's not a member, head outside and we can sign you up for free. The other great thing we have at the moment with our birthday of turning 120 is we are giving away $120,000 travel vouchers. So this is open for any Avant member who's a student, intern, RMO or DIT. We figure the older doctors can pay for their own travel. They earn enough now. So if you're a member, you automatically go into the draw. So you just need to become a member before the 12th of April, which is coming up pretty quick. So a bit of a rundown of what we have. It's free to join Avant to get indemnity insurance. That's free 24-hour, 7 days a week medico-legal advice. Avant has its own law firm, so if you do call up for that, the 1-800 number on the pen, it actually goes through to one of our lawyers' mobiles that's next to their beds. They sound a little groggy to start with, but they have actually turned up at a police station before for a doctor at 3 a.m. in the morning. Good to know it's there. You get your Medics Guide to Working in the World, Careers in Medicine book for any first years that are here, you would have got that already. Student e-bulletins, and you also get a bit of saving from Doctors' Health Fund for private health insurance, which is always good. So that's a little bit about us. Does anyone have any questions about Avant? Nah, that's cool. Thanks for listening, guys. Sorry, one more really quick thing that someone put into my hand. We are doing a social media webinar. Really big pitfall for you guys, and if you want a really entertaining social media Facebook group to follow, the Medical Registrar. It's an English guy, posts the most inappropriate stuff you've ever seen from a doctor, but a bit of an idea of what you shouldn't post. It is on the 9th of April and 23rd of April. There's 2 parts to it. It's free to log on. Just head to our website, avant.org.au. Thanks, guys.
Okay, hi guys, my name is Monica and I'm here from MIGA. I'm here to talk about the Electives Grant program that we do offer to all our members. So what's the Electives Grant program? It's support for medical students that undertake an elective placement in developing communities, whether in Australia or overseas. We are offering this year 6 grants of $3,500. $2,000 is for you, the student, and you can spend that on your travel, accommodation, vaccination, anything you want to spend that on. And $1,500 is for the community, to aid the community that you're going to. This year, one of those grants is actually for an Indigenous student, so anyone can apply, but one of the grants will be for an Indigenous student. So how do you apply? You need to apply online, and if you're doing your electives between March this year and February 2014, and you need to be an MIGA student member. So you can submit your application online, and I think applications open, and I'm not sure, on the 1st of May, and they close on the 30th of August this year. If you're not doing your electives between March and February next year, we run these grants every year, so you can apply next year for next year's grant. And you can go to our website to get more information or come and ask me outside. I'm not going to go through why you need insurance. I'm pretty sure you guys know that by now. We are, yes, the only MDO that covers worldwide, so we do cover you for your electives in the US or US territories. So if you're doing your electives anywhere that is a US territory, come and see me and make sure you do have cover with MIGA. It's free. And if you're not a member and you join today, you also get to enter the competition to win a $1,000 shopping voucher. We're giving away 3 of these, and it's your choice of either JB Hi-Fi, IKEA, Flight Centre or Sports Girls. That's it. Any questions? No? Thank you.
Hi. Hi guys, my name is Andrew. I work for MIPS, Medical Indemnity Protection Society. I think you've probably had your fair share of medical defence companies who've preceded me, so I will skip over a few of these slides. Obviously, it's very important to ensure that you are with one of us when you do head overseas, and I'd certainly encourage you to join a few. At the end of the day, it's going to be something that makes up a significant amount of your income at future, I guess in the future. So it's one of those things that you want to go with a company that meets your needs. In terms of what we offer, obviously, for your clinical activities during your placements and during the term, obviously those when you're on elective, as you'll see there, pretty much everywhere except the States, and Good Samaritan Access was covered by one of the predecessors. One of the good things with MIPS is that you always speak with a doctor when you call up for advice. What we find with our members is that they always appreciate that collegiate support. One thing is that they've obviously been a medical student before, they've been an intern, they've been a junior, they've been a registrar, what have you, and they're currently practising clinicians. So when you're describing the clinical nature of what's unfolded, they can obviously understand, sympathise and empathise with you as well. As well as that, you'll see down the bottom there, we do have additional cover, MIPS MDO protection, so if there is anything that happens outside of your normal clinical activities, you can certainly submit it to us, and we will aim to assist you as best we can. Student membership, obviously free for you guys. It's also very, very simple to let us know in terms of your elective. You can just quite simply send us an email, just with where you were going, the duration of the time, your supervisor and contact number. It's very, very straightforward. And again, if you are overseas and you call it at any hours of the day or night, we do have doctors that are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to take your calls. And it's very simple. You can become a member online. It's pretty straightforward on the forms. So you can do it on your mobile phone or just up the back. I'm sure we'll be up the back a little later. So thanks again, and good luck for your studies.
Just before I get started, who here is in third year? Who's in second year? And how many first years have we got? Lovely. Okay, so for those of you who I don't know, my name's Anita and I'm from Work the World. For those of you who haven't heard of Work the World, which is a high probability, we actually only launched our Australian office at the end of last year, so that's why it's highly unlikely that some of you have heard of us. We actually offer tailor-made elective placements for medical students. We do actually offer placements for all healthcare students, but the majority of the placements that we offer are for medical students. So I'm just very quickly, I'm not going to read through this, but you'll just get a bit of an overview in regards to what Work the World's about. So like I said, tailor-made medical electives, they're individually organised. So say, for instance, you want to go on an elective placement to Ghana and I want to do orthopaedic surgery. We will work with the hospitals and the clinics that we have in that location to make sure that you have a structured, tailored placement for what you actually want to achieve with your outcomes. Strong partnerships with hospital. And in regards to the food, accommodation and social life, we actually have Work the World houses in all of our destinations. So rather than sending you to go find your own accommodation or to put you in a host family situation, we actually put you in the Work the World house with other students just like yourself. So you'll actually have a nice supportive environment, and you'll find you'll get to meet some friends from all around the world that, like you, are med students. I'm not actually going to go through these, guys. I'm actually going to skip to an ex-University of Sydney student who is going to tell you about her experience in Argentina. A bit more exciting than listening to me anyway.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a final year medical student from the University of Sydney, and I've just done 9 weeks on placement in Mendoza. So I first heard about Work the World through friends of mine that had come and done the same placement last year, and heard sort of rave reviews of amazing wine, amazing food, awesome house, and of course good medical placement. It's incredibly easy to organise. Sort of, chose where I wanted to go, sent through all my information, and it really sort of doing it through Work the World took all the hassle out of having to self-organise, and it was sort of very stress-free. Any questions I had were sort of immediately answered, and I was able to get placements in sort of the exact areas that I wanted to get placed in, so that was really great. Got here, it was very welcoming, the house is awesome, staff are really helpful, really friendly, didn't have any problems, any concerns or anything like that. I did the 1 week Spanish course, which was really great. And their Spanish teacher is amazing, and she really tailors a course to exactly what you need or what you want. So I sort of got all up to date with the medical terms and everything, and it sort of really helped prepare you for that first week of placement. Also had some awesome activities, learnt to tango, made empanadas, wine tasting, so it was really a good introduction to the awesome Argentinian lifestyle. I did 3 placements while I was here. I did a paediatric oncology term, a general medicine term, and a general surgery term. So that was a really good sort of overview of how the healthcare system here works. Had a really great time in paediatric oncology, learnt a lot. The staff were incredibly helpful and friendly. Even got the opportunity to give a presentation in my last week, which was a bit daunting, but really, really great way to practice my Spanish and gain my confidence, and yeah, it was a really, really, really good opportunity. Surgery and general medicine were great. The staff are just incredibly dedicated to teaching, and they'll really, give you as much time as you want. I had, doctors going through research papers with me and helping me prepare presentations. So I learnt a lot here. Not only was it sort of a experience of a different healthcare system, I sort of learnt a lot of medical information as well, which is really useful.
So as you can see, that was actually shot on location in Argentina, so a little bit awkward. Poor Sarah was sitting on a balcony trying to do that, with everybody kind of pulling faces and stuff behind her, but that's kind of the environment in the house, so lots of fun. So I'm just going to really quickly whiz through the destinations that we have placements in. So obviously Argentina, Sarah's covered that, so we'll skip there. Ghana. So Africa obviously is really, really popular. So we have a destination in Ghana. For those of you who are interested in surgery or ONG, amazing opportunities in Ghana. Tanzania. So we have 2 destinations in Tanzania, really popular for Australians. So I'd probably say that we've had a really good number of University of Sydney students. So you'd probably be able to find some case studies from Tanzania from previous students. So we've got one placement in Arusha, which is up in the Masai Plains, and a placement in Dar es Salaam, which is a pretty cool city. It's a really big kind of mega city in Africa, so it's a little bit different type of placement to that, which is offered in Arusha. They were pretty excited on safari. Nepal. So Nepal, another really, really popular destination with Australians. So lots of opportunities there as well to kind of explore exactly what you want to do. Orthopaedics is really big in Nepal, and in particular we work with this amazing clinic which does leprosy and rehabilitation. So if you're interested in orthopaedics, Nepal's a pretty good place to go to. There's a lot of burns injuries that happen and a lot of motor car accidents, sorry. Sri Lanka, another popular destination, really good for ONG and paediatrics. So if there are any areas that might interest you. The Philippines is our newest destination, and it has gone crazy. It actually hasn't even launched. It launches in May of this year, and we've already got periods where we're completely booked out. So it's a super exciting opportunity. They speak English in the Philippines as well, so you also don't have to compete with the language barrier. We do offer language lessons in the house to try and give you some support, but as you can imagine, you've got cultural issues as well as language issues that you do have to overcome in all of these developing nations. Add-on project. So just really quickly, Sarah alluded to the fact that she did an intensive Spanish course for 1 week before she actually went on placement, which made her placement a 9-week placement because she still had to complete her 8 weeks. That's what we offer in Argentina, and it's a really good mix, like she mentioned, of language and cultural activities. We also offer village experiences in some of our locations. So for example, in Arusha, you actually get to go to a Maasai village. You spend an entire week there. It's very eye-opening, is probably the nicest way of putting it. There's a lot of students that are quite confronted by what they see, and it is something that you do need to be prepared for. So usually we leave that to the end of your placement, so just factor that in. Yeah, we've had lots of tears, unfortunately, but the reality is the awesome thing that you do get to experience is such a different healthcare setting, and you get to bring that back to Australia and apply that. So follow us on Facebook. You'll see lots of links. For those of you who are a member of MIPS, you might have seen there was an awesome case study that was in the MIPS newsletter a couple of months back. So for those of you who haven't, jump online, have a look at it. It's a really good case study, and it's from a student who went to Africa. So really interesting. But check us out. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Stand by. See if it works. Have a go back. All right. I can only go forwards. All right, part time you've all been waiting for. It's childproof. Okay. Hi guys, my name's Simon. You might recognize me from my incredibly corny talk to the video camera thing at your first year orientation. I know Sarah personally, and I promise you she's not that awkward in real life. Sarah's actually in the year above, and she's an intern now, so she's out there doing the real thing. Yes. Okay, here we go, we'll start. The best thing about studying medicine is that it doesn't matter what else you're interested in, you can always find a way to tie it back into medicine, right? I love travel, I bloody love it. Like every chance I get out of Australia. Maybe that's because I'm from Wollongong and you try and leave whenever you can, I don't know. But yes, so I always try and get out as quickly as I can. So over the last 3 years, I've managed to get myself across the globe under the guise of studying medicine. So I did my ILA on the Tiwi Islands, about 80 k's north of Darwin, doing Indigenous health promotion. Next, I went to Mozambique and spent some time in the Heart Institute in Maputo, where it's basically an adult private hospital, and the proceeds that they get from doing that, they perform pro bono heart surgery on kids. Then at the end of second year, I went on the HOCMI program to Vietnam and did a month in the ICU and cardiology departments. You might have seen that photo on the first slide of the guy welding IV stands to the patient's bed while the patient was still in it. I presented at a conference in Japan on interprofessional education, and just last month I came back from Baltimore in the USA, where I was representing AMSA at the International Federation of Medical Student Associations General Assembly. Yeah, good. But it's the two in the middle of that I'm going to talk about tonight because they didn't give me enough time. So on my elective, I was away for 107 days, 8 countries, 16 airports, 50,011 kilometers just on a plane. So I was raised on a healthy diet of honesty is the best policy. But apparently, if a guy you just met gives you a ukulele as a present and you tell that to the airport security, they think you have a bomb and you get frisked. Lie. Yes. Times jumped naked into a frozen Swedish lake 4, which correlates quite well with the times I thought I was going to die. And also had my fair share of heartbreaks and hangovers. So I have a confession to make. I have 2 confessions, actually. The first one is that I didn't choose my elective based on the medicine. I'm not ashamed to say it. I chose it because I wanted to have amazing adventures, crazy new experiences, and hang out with attractive locals. Anything that happened within the walls of the hospital was going to be a bonus on top of that. And that's exactly what happened. My second confession to make is that I didn't really know anything about Israel before I'd organised my elective and bought plane tickets there. So I had to Google if Israel was a third world country or not. But it turns out that I wasn't the only one, because it's the first option that comes up. So I felt a little bit sad. So it turns out that Israel has one of the top 10 healthcare systems in the entire world. Awkward. But I felt a little bit better than this guy who wasn't sure if Israel was even a country. And if you're wondering, Israeli couscous is not gluten-free. Sorry. Okay, so all right, off I went to Israel. So once back, I figured out the state of the nation, so I was ready to go to my placement at Hadassah Ein Kerem Hospital in Jerusalem. So it's a tertiary referral centre with about 800 beds across 130 departments, and overlooks a beautiful valley with all these little villages dotted around. It's about 40 minutes by bus from the city, so maybe you consider it being like Concord if you're living in the city. We actually lived above a nightclub, so every time I left the house, it was like pit bull and strobe lights hitting me in the face. It's really entertaining. So Hadassah's amazing. It's the tertiary referral centre for both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So patients who are not Israelis, who are Palestinians, can get good quality healthcare when they need it most. The hospital's actually been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 2005 due to its equal treatment of all patients based on race, religion, and culture, so that was a really cool, to be a part of that. Yep. So this... Can't make that up, can you? So the staff and students were all fantastic. They were really welcoming. In terms of my duties at the hospital, I was placed with a group of 7 final year Hebrew University students. We had tutors from consultants, ward rounds, self-directed learning. They were kind enough to have their tutors in English instead of Hebrew, which was really nice. And the medicine was of the same standard as you'd get in Sydney. So cons. Language barrier, so none of the patients spoke English. All of the students and doctors did, but it was a bit hard for me to examine patients on my own, so I always had to have a student translator. I left for Israel 2 weeks after the ceasefire was called, between Israel and the Gaza Strip. I felt safe the entire time, but it's not the kind of safety where you're worried about walking around the streets at night. It's kind of like, well, if a missile's going to come, then it's going to come. Like, what are you going to do about it? So I really felt safe for the whole time. So Israel is kind of in a bit of a tricky spot. So if you go to Israel, you can, but you can't really travel to any countries around the Middle East because they all hate Israel. Jerusalem isn't a party city, but Tel Aviv is 40 minutes away, and that is. And the med students there are more focused than you will ever be. 3 years compulsory military service, and you try and pretend to be smart, and they're like, no, sorry. Pros, culture, history, religion. Like, Jerusalem is the most phenomenal city, one of the best cities I've ever been to. Even if you're not religious, like, being there, the vibe, the energy is just fantastic. The medicine's great, incredibly well supported. I was lucky enough to get a Sir Zelman Cohen University's Fund Scholarship, which definitely helped. And they were really supportive of everything that we did. And yeah, it's an amazing part of the world. Israel is fantastic. Like, we went snorkeling, you can go skiing, there was like the beaches, there was nightclubs, they're floating in the Dead Sea. Really, really cool. Cool, so next, Sweden. All right, so for the second half of my placement, I studied in Sweden. I have to admit that I studied there in my undergraduate degree for 6 months, so I can speak basic Swedish. And I wanted to go back and visit my friends. But like, going to Karolinska, like, it's one of the well-renowned medical research institutes in the whole world. So even if you don't speak Swedish, like, it's going to be an amazing medical experience. Yeah, that's Swedish. Unfortunately, there is a total ban on flowers because of infection risk and hypersensitivity reactions to patients and stuff. That's the biggest word I've ever seen. Okay, so Karolinska. So I was in the renal medicine department for the first 2 weeks and respiratory for the second 2 weeks. That's the hospital. That entire thing is the hospital. So the thorax, which is the respiratory department, is that maroon kind of building over in the back there. And the oncology building where they do the research is that building over there. So we had to go between the two. Ridiculous. So yeah, everyone was really nice. Like, really, really nice. Like, Swedish politeness nice. Like, the consultants would sit me down for an hour and give me a one-on-one tute, and I was like, why are you doing this? And this resident, he said to me, oh, well, this is a teaching hospital, it's our obligation to teach you. I was like, oh. Okay, cool. And the hospital actually organizes, get this, the hospital actually organizes for the new clinical students to go on a free cruise to Finland to visit a hospital in Helsinki, which was just ridiculous. Like, so on the first day of third year, all the students go to Finland. All right. And we got to go too, so that was cool. So I just attended staff meetings in the morning, clinics, ward rounds, tutorials, and they gave me a good level of responsibility, even though I couldn't really speak that much Swedish. Apart from the hospital, there's plenty of other stuff to keep you entertained in Sweden. Can someone, if you can explain that to me in medical reasons, then you get 100 points. So yes, there's me coming out of the frozen lake. So the MedSoc at Karolinska is extremely active. They have pubs, trips, parties all the time. They even have a sauna in their MedSoc building, and the MedSoc council just hangs out in there, like, naked all the time. So I got involved in that. I'm going to try and install one in Blackburn by the end of the year. So this is, you know the day that was 45 degrees here? Well, I was in minus 15, 60 degrees difference, very, very cold. And because of the ice of the ground, I fell over a lot. It was really embarrassing. And because everyone is so damn attractive, you look really ugly by comparison. So you have to, like, really play up the Aussie thing, like, yeah, g'day, mate. They love it, they love it. Yeah, really well supported, virtually no language barrier. Some of the patients, like, everyone under 50 speaks better English than we do in Australia. world-class medicine, you can get an Office of Global Health scholarship. I didn't get one, but you can. And the rest of Europe is right there, so it's really easy to travel. Hot tips. Think about why you're going on elective. If you want to go and get really hands-on, practical, go rural, go remote, go to a third world country. If you want to pretend to be an intern, go to the US, go to the UK. You'll get 10, 12-hour days, and you'll get the responsibility that you want. If you don't want to do any of that, go to Europe. Read the reports that are online. They're really good. That's why I decided not to go to the US or the UK. Go with friends. It always helps when you're getting settled. But once you're there, ditch them and hang out with the Swedish people. Sorry, Ali. And finally, always say yes. So if somebody comes and says, hey, do you want to go and grab some shisha at the local military bar? Yes. Hey, do you want to try some reindeer soup? Yes. Hey, can I buy you a drink? Yes. So yeah, always say yes. Like, what could go wrong, right? And as promised, the final pro, Swedes. Did anyone have any questions? No? Good. All right.
Anyway.
Do you want this?
Sure.
Simon. Lucky
We've reached
me.
this point by this time in our relationship.
And what do I do with this?
Just click it like a mouse. Oh.
Oh, wait. This one. Okay. Click it like a mouse. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Jess. I'm also in 4th year. You've probably seen me beating around the bush with AMSA, and I'm the New South Wales MSc chair this year. So I did 2 electives. I did one for 4 weeks in Tanzania and one for 4 weeks in Malta. So I thought I'd start out with some practical tips. No, that's not how you do it. That's it. So on how to start. So Simon's kind of alluded to this already, but firstly, decide on the type of elective you like. So do you want something challenging? Do you want to be the intern, like Simon said? Do you want something inspiring? Do you want to be there where there's first-hand research of some fandangled genetic thing? Do you want something really different? Do you want to be the med doc on the ski slopes? Or a scuba diving, there's one in the Maldives, I think, that you can go scuba diving with. Do you want something similar? You want to stay at home and be in Australia? Do you want something more relaxed, like a holiday, i.e. Simon? Or do you need something for references, so you're a Canadian-US thing? So then you have to pick a destination. So again, as I said, stay at home, or do you want to be in Sydney or rural Australia or up in northern Queensland? And do you want to go overseas? If you're going overseas, how much money do you have? Which countries? And what would you like to see, experience and do? So I was a bit like Simon. I wanted to travel. And I'd never been to Africa and I'd never been to Malta. So I ended up there. So you have to consider all these points when you start to do it, okay? One of the other things is to also think about is timing. So a lot of students had to consider whether they wanted to stay at home for Christmas and be with their families, or if you wanted to spend the whole time overseas, because you need to do your 8-week block, but if you want to travel around that, it's fine. So you might as well while you're overseas, is what I think. So start researching, do it early. Everyone tonight will probably tell you to do it early. It does help. But that being said, it's not impossible to get something overseas if you are running late. I personally loved the Electives Network. Unfortunately, it wasn't free when I was looking for mine. So I had to pay, but I used it anyway. And it was absolutely fantastic. It has a little map of the entire world, and you can just click on a country, and I basically just did that. I spent hours on it. So, and remember, it takes time. So a lot of these places you apply for will want things like a letter of reference from your university, a CV, your grades, things like that. So you need to make sure you get all these things together when you start approaching universities, and things like the Elective Network and the Avant book is really good because they give you guidelines on what people are going to want when you apply. So, onto the fun stuff. So my first placement was in Moshi in Tanzania. So
I really wanted to go to Africa. I'd never been, and I wanted to go on safari. So I'd heard it was really hands-on, and that this University Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Centre, which I'll call KCMC from now on, was a great place to go because there's a lot of other students that go over there. So it's really, you stayed on campus at the hospital with all the other medical students. It was really social. There was a lot of support for that. And the medicine is totally different from what you'll see in Australia. So this was the main entrance to the hospital. We got to do things like go on outreach clinics, and some of them were lectures on things like HIV/AIDS, but some were also visiting patients in hospitals on the base of Kilimanjaro and places like that, more rural than this town that we were in. So Moshi itself is a small rural town of Tanzania. However, it's grown a lot over the last few years because there's such a big trade for climbing Kilimanjaro because it's right on the base of Kilimanjaro. So this was ward rounds. So in the morning we would do ward rounds, and you could have up to 30 people on your ward round. So at one stage we had a bit of a scare, and they thought a family may have come in with something unidentified and highly contagious and lethal. And so they closed down an entire ward of the paediatrics department and moved all the patients from there, so 40 plus patients, into another ward which already had 40 plus patients and did not have any more room for any more patients. And then all the medical students and doctors also came into that ward, and we ended up with about 30 people on the ward round in the morning, so 30 people trying to squish around one bed. Is not great. So this was our morning meeting. So in paediatrics at 7:30 in the morning we had a morning meeting, and everyone came in the same room and they'd present the new cases of the that have been taken in overnight. One of the great things about being an elective student there was they asked us to present some cases. So one of the things was a bit of a language barrier with a lot of the patients. All the medical students and doctors spoke English, but often the patients did not. But we would just admit those patients with the medical students, and you see some really interesting stuff. That was the view from the morning meeting. So I usually got fairly distracted because I would stare out the window, and then you can hear the church, which is just downstairs, and the choir voices, and they're singing, and I was just not listening to what the doctors were saying. That's a CT machine which has been broken for 3 years. They'll proudly tell you have a CT machine, but it hasn't been functional for 3 years. And this was the NICU. So their NICU beds are 4 cots. That's where their preemie babies are kept. It is the 3rd room of their paediatrics neonatal room, and as you walk through the rooms you get hotter and hotter because they can't afford to individually heat the beds, so they just heat the room. So it's probably like about 45 degrees in that room, and you have to wear a lab coat and you're just sweating. It's not nice. And that's the emergency department. So as I said, we stayed on campus right next to the hospital. It was reasonable accommodation. We paid about $150 US for the whole month. There's no internet, so you have to sort that yourself. But we did have electricity most of the time. It tended to go out around 7:30, right in the middle of cooking dinner, which is not fun eating uncooked food, or waiting for another 4 hours for it to come back on. And you did have running water, again, most of the time, and sometimes hot water. So that was our kitchen, again, pretty basic because it was electric stove, and pantry. I don't know if I can go backwards, but behind here is actually your sink for washing, so hand washing, guys. It's fun. And lounge room and bathroom and everything. So as I've alluded to, one of the great things about KCMC was the social side of things. So plenty of other students there to interact with. We had a game of ultimate frisbee going on twice a week, and we went to a local school to play on their school grounds, and the local kids were watching us, so they ended up joining in up there. We went on safari for a few days as well, which was amazing, and did the whole Maasai village thing, and learned about medicine there, which was really, really interesting. And you can go hiking and waterfalls and all sorts of beautiful things. So then we had a bit of a culture shock and we changed and went to Mater Dei Hospital in Malta. So many people when we got there asked us, so why did you choose an elective here? How did you even find us? And I probably should have put a map up on there tonight because Malta is this tiny little island. It's about 27 kilometres by 15 kilometres on the bottom of Sicily in Italy. So it's not actually Italian, it's its own country, and the Mater Dei Hospital provides the medical service for the entire country, which is not that big because it's an island. So they were like, oh, how did you find us? Like, well, why did you pick it? And I was kind of like, well, we put in lots of applications and we wanted to go to, you know, Scotland and Ireland and England, and it had to be English speaking, but none of them accepted us. And then we saw Malta and we applied and you guys said yes. So we ended up there. But actually it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened because we had the most amazing elective there. Again, they provided us with accommodation with all the other medical students. It was about €200 for the whole month to stay there, and we had the best time. So this was my team. Again, I did paediatrics, and here I got a bit more of a broad spectrum. So I was on paediatric neurology, and but my team was really fantastic. They organised for me to go spend a couple of days in the NICU. I also spent time doing baby checks. I mostly just played with kids because it was all developmental screening. But it was absolutely fantastic because I was the only student on the whole team and they really looked after me. So that's the hospital. Sits on the top of the hill, and at the top of the hill you can look from one side to the other side of the island. It's great. And these were the wards. So if you ever want to go anywhere, and if you're a total kid, you'll love this: Disneyland, Wonderland and Rainbow Ward. The surgical kids ward is called Fairyland. So it's a lot of fun, and that's a typical room for them. They have stuff hanging up on the walls and lots of paintings and pictures. It's actually done really, really well. It's a fantastic peds hospital. So I forgot to take any photos of the accommodation in Malta, but that was the view from our balcony. So we were right on the beach. It would be a great place in summer. It was a little bit cold to go swimming when we were there. But you're right in the centre of town with the accommodation, and it's so easy to get around. The bus tickets are really cheap and you just jump on a bus. The bus stop was just at the end of our street there. 15 minutes to the hospital was really easy. And the accommodation was great. And Malta has plenty of things to do in itself. So it's actually a stunningly beautiful place to visit. It's very Mediterranean-esque, but it's really historically rich because they've been taken over by so many different countries. They've been invaded by the Turks, the Italians, the French, the English, anyone, you name it. And they have lots of carnivals and festivals. So this was their carnival on Gozo, which is a smaller island off Malta, which is part of Malta. Also, Malta is your gateway into Europe. Again, like Simon said, it's an hour flight to Rome, 3 hours to London, about the same to Paris. So we did a lot of travelling around there, and it was really easy. Never have I ever taken a backpack on an international flight before, so until I went to Malta. So I think, and I went skiing too. I think that's it from me. I'd highly recommend either of those, and if you want to have a chat to me about either, come down and talk to me later. Thanks.
G'day everyone. My name's Dave. I'm here to talk about doing something a little bit different. That is, not going overseas. The way I see it, there are two main reasons you do this. The first and most common is because you're a little bit unorganised and tonight's the first time you heard that all the scholarship applications have closed and you don't have a spare $10,000 lying around to pay for flights. The second, and the one you should tell the hospitals you're applying to, and which was actually true for me, is if you are interested in particularly Indigenous health, but also trying to understand a broader picture of Australia and a broader picture of Australian health. I think we have an enormous tendency to get a very limited vision of Australia when we're doing all our medical education in major tertiary referral hospitals in Sydney. So, I went to Darwin and did child and adolescent mental health, and it was a really great term. So, if at this point you're just worried and haven't been able to organise an overseas elective, don't panic. There are still fun adventures to have in Australia. So, this is Kakadu. It's like the world's most beautiful national park, and it's half an hour out of Darwin. So why Darwin? I've already gone through that. I could do a lecture on how to not organise an elective, or how to stuff up organising electives. So these were the first 5 options. I was pretty convinced I wanted to go to the Territory. I really love the Territory, and I want to learn more about Indigenous health. I'm a bit interested in psychiatry. I'm a bit interested in general practice. Really, I was happy to do whatever. So step 1. Emailed Darwin Centre for Tropical Diseases. This was in March, kind of my 3rd year, so I thought I was starting very early. Apparently I would have missed all the scholarship applications by this stage. To which this consultant that I emailed replied saying he was stoked, I'd be great, it was locked in. I just had to talk to the uni admin staff who gave me a firm no, / if you reapply on December 15th, you might be able to get in. So that was out. I emailed the hospital. They had a kind of, if you're thinking about organising electives, I never heard back from that, so avoid that option. So I thought, I'll talk to the GP staff for the Central Clinical School. They were really helpful in organising my GP term. They were not so helpful in wanting to go beyond their job description, which is fair enough. It's not their job, but didn't get a lot of places there. Alice Springs Hospital, you email and then you get a reply about 6 weeks later. That's not really what you were asking for. So you've got to re-email, then you get a reply about 8 weeks later, thinking that you're a different person to a different name. So that wasn't really helpful. And then I emailed the Menzies Centre, which is a research school. Nothing happened from there. So by this stage, it's June. Nothing has happened. And so I did what all good medical students do, and you resort to personal connections. So I had this really vague, loose personal connection of someone my mum used to work to who was there, got the number, rang them up, done. So this is my tip. If you can find someone who has enough authority to say, yeah, sure, it's locked in, then that simplifies the whole process into one phone call. And I ended up having a really great term. But the funnest step was getting there. So that's broadly the route we went, although we did a bit of a detour through Lake Eyre and then out through the West Macdonald Ranges just west of Alice Springs. So my wife and I spent 2 weeks driving up. 10 points for guessing where that is. It's Cobar. It's not like, don't stay there too long. There were emus. That's Lake Eyre. It's really pretty. If you haven't been there, you should go. That's weird. There's, in the middle of the Stewart Highway, there's this weird kind of desert sculpture garden. I don't know, it was cool. That's the big winch in Cooper Pedy. It's for sale. If anyone's interested in a career change to tourism, it's really big. But there's also Catherine Gorge and Litchfield National Park, all of which you should see. If for no other reason than it gives you a bigger picture of Australia and a different way of thinking about medicine. So while I was there, so Darwin is a city of only about 100,000 people. The whole Northern Territory, 200,000 people. I live in Ashfield, a suburb of 40,000 people. So it's a whole state with 5 suburbs in it. I got to see quite a lot of kids growing up with a history of trauma and consequently attachment disorders. I also got to see a lot of autism and ASD assessments, which is something I didn't get any exposure to in my psych term back in Sydney. And lots of learning disabilities, which is kind of a lot of the bread and butter of child psych, and really helpful for, I'm hoping, it's going to be really helpful for peds later as well. One other tip, this was another mistake I made. Turns out if the service you're going to does lots of trips out into remote Indigenous communities, which is one of the reasons you elected to go with them, they might not go during the wet season. which is when your electives are over summer. So that was a bit of a bummer. We didn't get to do as much of that, but there were a lot of kind of for the closer communities to Darwin and the patients who get sectioned and flown into Darwin, which is really interesting. Kind of psychotic people who also have this weird, well not, sorry, that's offensive, but different Indigenous worldview and spirituality which you can't really access even when they're not barking mad, is a really interesting way of assessing psychosis. So give that a go if you get a chance. So tips. Be willing to have backup plans, especially if you're trying to self-organise and not go through one of the commercial organisations that can be a bit more expensive. Be willing to be flexible and just go with what happens. And probably start early. I thought I was starting early, but going the start of third year, that's kind of the earliest I've ever prepared for anything. But it turns out things are a bit smoother if you start even earlier than that. But also, don't feel like it's a cop-out to stay in Australia, because there is things to learn and different things to see if you stay here. Cheers.
Can I use this? So is this on? Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. My name's Ashley. I did my elective in New York with the Office of Global Health Scholarship with Columbia University. I did 2 electives, so I did 4 weeks in my hometown in Queensland just because I wanted to be at home for a little while for Christmas. And then I went to New York for all of February at St Luke's Roosevelt Hospital. This is Columbia University. It's very pretty. And where was the hospital? It was at the bottom of Central Park, if any of you know Manhattan. I wanted to go to New York since I was in first year med, so I was just always gunning for that. So if you do get the opportunity to apply for the global health scholarships, it's the easiest way to get there. America charges a lot of money every week that you do an elective if you do it self-organised, so it's just easier to go through Sydney Uni. This is the hospital. And it was 2 hospitals, so St Luke's and Roosevelt. And you can pick where you want to go, which hospital of those 2. So my rotation, I was in the emergency department, and it was really, really well organised. If you go to Columbia, you should definitely do the emergency department rotation, because if you do a medicine term or a surgery term, you're there all day, every day. Whereas in the ED, you have set shifts and you clock on, you clock off. And with Columbia, you can just sign on to the shift that suits you. So if I had something better to do on a day, I could just change my shift to the next day or change it later or earlier. I had to do 14 10-hour shifts and 1 ambulance ride-along, which was really fun. There was lots of teaching. You were expected to be at all the teaching sessions. They taught ultrasound and random things. It was really good. And there was 4 other elective students doing it at the same time, so they can become your friends. Then you have an exam and a presentation at the end, which is pretty stressful, but it's a good way to make you actually learn something. This is the ambulance ride-along. That's Barbie and Tommy. They were really fun. They were really cool guys, and we just roved around Manhattan for the whole day. We only had 3 patients on my shift, so we had a lot of coffees and just sat by that river. It was really good. That's me in the back. That's where I had to sit. So in the hospital, you do get a lot of responsibility. If you want to go to America, you have to commit to working pretty hard when you're actually at the hospital. So I would have my own patients, and I would take their history, do their exams, discuss it with my attending, and I'd take their bloods and put their IV line in. I got to staple a lady's scalp back together. She was 85. She was so nice. She didn't mind. I did a bit of suturing, mainly on the intoxicated patients. It was really cool because I got to do about 20 sutures into some intoxicated guy's head who was just passed out and slept through the whole thing, and just snored really loudly. But, you know, the attending just left me in the room and I could just do it on my own because I'm not that good at suturing, and so it's just good to not have someone breathing down your neck. What? I got to do CPR during the trauma calls, and they're big hospitals, so it was some pretty stressful, crazy things that came in, and I got to watch a lot of things, and like this woman came in with her hip that just kept dislocating, so there was like 5 of us all trying to hold onto the leg, and she had some benzo in her system, like she wasn't screaming, but it was, yeah, it was pretty wild. I was there during the big freeze or the big snowstorm, so that was my walk to work, and that was the apartment that my friend and we were living in with all the fairy lights. It was right near the hospital. It was awesome. So yeah, David was right. If you want to go to America especially, it really does cost a bomb. It is outrageous. So I borrowed money for it, and I really recommend if you go to America, don't do it cheaply. Like, go have fun and borrow money and prepare to spend a lot. But if you do want to do a cheaper elective, I mean, go to Asia or stay in Australia. So just be prepared for that. And the accommodation, this is what I recommend all of you write down right now, is this website called Rotating Rooms. So my med friend, Nicole, and I went over, and she was in the NICU and I was in the ED, and it's this bizarre website that you just go onto, and it's all for medical students or residents or registrars, and you just go on there and you type the hospital you're going to, and it's just where people sublet their rooms to you. They're other medical students or doctors or whatever, and it's just a much cheaper way to get accommodation. So, I mean, it seemed pretty dodgy. We just gave this deposit of money to this random guy in New York, but it worked out amazingly, and we had this awesome apartment that's, lived in, and like we just used his kitchen and all his stuff, and he had like free internet and free movies and all this stuff, so it was just awesome. And then Katie asked me to talk about fun things, so I'm kind of embarrassed about some of these slides now. So there was so many medical students in New York. It was just so much fun. A lot of people get around the world trips, so we just had this constant flow of people coming and staying in our apartment or being in New York, or people were at Cornell or Brown or in Boston. So it was just unbelievable. Like, that was a house party. This was Rockefeller Center skating ring. These are all med people. That's Times Square-ish. This is our amazing apartment. We were all watching the Oscars live. That's just going out in the East Village. It was just awesome. These guys were at Brown. Yeah, they just came to visit. That's Nicole and I. That's the river, Brooklyn Bridge, another bridge. Did lots of cool touristy things. There's so much to do in New York. It was definitely the best 5 weeks of my entire life. Saw these, went to New York Fashion Week, and went to a Rangers game with the ice hockey. I was going for jogs around Central Park, and there's heaps of pubs and clubs, and we lived right next to Broadway. It's the Rangers game. Oh, that's New York pizza slice. That officer, Rodriguez, he gave me his hat. This is the fashion show. This is pretty fierce. Central Park. Oh, this is Budokan. It's an awesome restaurant. It's on Sex and the City, if any of you are fans like me. Gossip Girl. It's near our house or our apartment. And, oh yeah, so things to remember. Definitely write this down because it's international, so it's not just America, it's everywhere. And even if you guys want to sublet your room while you're on elective, you can do that on this website. Also, resume building. So the first is start working on that now if you want to get an Office of Global Home or Health Scholarship. Sorry. Tools. Do stuff for your resume, obviously if you want to do it. So I went on HOCMI, which was awesome, and I was on MedSoc and did things like that. Get travel insurance. That's good that Avant is giving you all travel insurance because my laptop got stolen. And yeah, don't do your elective in blocks that you haven't already done, because I did obs and gynae in Vietnam, and that was really difficult with the language barrier. And then, and also even when I tried to do a physical exam, I was like, she's pregnant. So that was it. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'll take the portal one if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. This is the last one, you might be pleased to hear, and my elective experience was, I think, quite different to all the ones that you've heard before. My name's Ben, I finished third year medicine and just did an elective in Burma or Myanmar. They're sort of interchangeable names. I spent 4 weeks there, and this was an elective that I organised myself by essentially going to a function, meeting this guy who'd done and it's sort of elective, but he's a doctor over in Myanmar, and thinking that'd be really interesting to go to because in 2011 I went to Myanmar, had a great time, decided I'd like to go back, and I have ophthalmology on my list of things that I'd like to try, and he'd just gone to Myanmar with a bunch of ophthalmologists. I thought, perfect. So I spoke to him, got the contact details of someone that he went with, and set up a telephone call and a meeting with that guy, and he said, yep, happy to have you come along. So it was actually extremely easy to organise, but it did require me to think quite far in advance about what I wanted to do and pursue those connections off my own bat. So I'd suggest that you might like to pursue that type of model. It means that you can get a really interesting elective experience, and it also means you avoid, of course, any cost or lengthy application process. So this particular photo was taken at Ubain Bridge, which, has anyone been to Myanmar by any chance? One person? Two or three? Ubain Bridge is outside of Mandalay, which is a city in the north of Myanmar, and it's a quite nice sort of tourist attraction, I guess, but it also is quite a functional bridge, which a lot of monks will use as they cross. The university is far on one side, far away from the city where any nasty students might like to protest, and you go there and you can watch a lovely sunset. And the reason I thought this photo was really interesting is because in the just 2 years between my first trip to Myanmar and the second one, the country has changed quite a lot, which was one of the reasons I wanted to go back. And when I was there at the start of 2011, like almost no one had a mobile telephone. It was one of the rarest things to see, and if you had a mobile telephone, it meant you had about $1,000 to pay for a SIM card. So you were one of the uber rich within Myanmar. Whereas now, as you can see, even young monks have mobile phones. So the country is changing quite a lot, and thus I think if you'd like to visit Myanmar at some stage, now's a great time to go and visit, and then go again in a few years' time, or maybe a decade, and see what massive changes have taken place since then. It was certainly a very very interesting experience for me from that perspective, but medically it was also a great experience. But this is where I think actually my experience has been most different to some of yours, because I kind of watched almost with jealousy some of those slides, thinking how much fun you guys looked like you had. I had a really good time, but it wasn't a fun experience. So mine is the type of elective I guess you do if you want to explore a particular field of medicine, and maybe if you want to challenge your mind about what global health delivery means and how foreign doctors can get involved, because most of the 99% of the care that I was involved with there was delivered by Australian, American or Indian ophthalmologists with the aid of local nurses who functioned both as nurses and coordinators and translators. And I think actually if there was one thing I could take with me on another trip there, I would like to take a professional translator, because one of the really difficult things about the experience was not being able to speak to the patients. And you might think for ophthalmology, perfect specialty in a country which doesn't speak English, perhaps other than pathology, because you can just see everything, right? The eye is quite accessible. You can even do a lot of your investigations. Is there an infection? We'll have a look in the anterior chamber and see if there are white cells. But the history that's associated with these people's conditions is actually still extremely important, and it's very difficult to extract an accurate history when you don't have a good translator or you can't speak the language yourself. We saw an unbelievable number of foreign body injuries and stick injuries to eyes and things that you just sort of think, how does a 4-year-old get a stick injury to their eye on so many different individual occasions? And it was challenging, I guess, for me to try and make sense of some of the things that you were seeing and understand how you could make a difference there. My biggest reflection of the whole trip actually was that you probably need to, if you're going to run one of these things, you need to do better pre- and post-operative visual acuity measurement and really keep good track of complications and be measuring that on a per surgeon basis, because with a model of healthcare delivery where you have people coming for a week or 2 weeks at a time and then leaving and not necessarily being familiar with the particular operative procedure, because there all that's really available is what's termed small incision cataract surgery, which is a method that uses a scalpel to make an incision rather than, and you sort of almost force out the cataract rather than using a phacoemulsification laser to cut it out as we do here, meant that the quality of surgeon, even if they were great at home, put into that different environment could be quite variable. So it's made me think a lot about, if you're going to be an Australian doctor who wants to spend part of your time helping to deliver healthcare overseas, what are the best ways to do that? What are the ways not to do that? It was interesting to reflect on the different ways the doctors dealt with some of the more traumatic cases that we would see as well, and how that would affect them personally. So I guess overall what I'm saying is mine was a bit more of a thought-provoking experience perhaps than has been presented, although I'm sure there would have been aspects that you would have seen, Jess, when you're in Africa, which would have elicited the same things and perhaps just haven't been touched on today. So one of the instructions for this talk was not to include too many identifying patient photos or something, but there are 2 photos that I've included in my presentation because I think photos are quite important in helping to relay some of what I saw. Ophthalmology is a difficult one to black out the eyes with, but I've tried. So I've blacked out one eye in the next one, and you'll understand why. This particular image was probably one of the patients, which it was really quite tough to know, what really to do with a case like this, because what you find when you go overseas to a country like Burma is that they just don't have very good resources available to everyone, and if you can do something but not the next thing, then you really have to think about whether you do the something in the first place. So for example, someone might come in, we had a pair of parents, they were both I think about 21 years old, they had a 3-year-old boy with them, and this boy had quite an ugly looking eye, and it really looked like there was a mass retrobulbally. And they actually had a CT scan with them, which is quite unusual because that probably costs about $100 in Mandalay, and really that's quite a lot of money for people. What the CT scan showed and what the clinical picture suggested was that this was probably a retinoblastoma, and that often then will have seeding into the brain, which you are going to be quite concerned about. That's a bad prognosis. You might like to look, if this scan was done, say in June, as this one was, and the patient presented in December, to see with a follow-up scan how those little calcified spots in the brain have progressed. The difficult challenge, though, for any of the doctors there was, yes, at home you just order it like that, and even if they had to go and pay for it privately, it wouldn't be very expensive, and everyone would do that for their 3-year-old child and could do that. There, that might actually bankrupt a family if you said to them you need to go and get another CT scan. And so you have to be very careful, and again, this is where having not very good translation services becomes problematic, that you don't imply to a parent, for instance, that the right thing for them to do for their 3-year-old child that they love is to go and get a follow-up CT scan so that we can tell whether or not this cancer has spread into their brain and whether or not it's really going to be a great idea to operate or what. And of course, paediatric oncology services are available in Myanmar, but not for everybody, not for that family. This particular photo is a similar case in a sense in that it's most likely a retinoblastoma, but it's the type of retinoblastoma that you'd never see in Australia. And I'll show you here. So this patient is another 3-year-old boy, and in the background you can see the vestige of his mother. So she was a woman from a hill tribe right on the border of Burma and Laos, and she was essentially wearing traditional sort of hillside tribal dress. She didn't change her clothes throughout the time they stayed at hospital, as not a lot of people did, and she didn't even speak Burmese. So she ended up picking up a nun. Sorry, I see Ash is a little traumatised by that, so I'll hide the photo for the moment. But she picked up a nun on the way to visit us in Wachet, which was outside of Mandalay, and the nun had to act as a translator then from the hillside dialect into Burmese, and then the nurses helped to translate from Burmese into English. So you can see that the translation challenge is compounded even further. So trying to take a history of this, understand whether there are other members of the family that might have had retinoblastoma as well, and again, just even trying to understand how to translate that concept is quite challenging. With that particular patient, that eye obviously was removed. I can't remember, it was either his eye or the other boy's eye that I described, but what was removed, I don't think even got sent to pathology by some mix-up, so we didn't even get pathology back. If you did get pathology back, God knows whether it's really a very good diagnosis or if they've been led by the suggestion that you've put on the request form. So I guess what I'm trying to say with all of this is that some of your elective experiences might also be a little bit more challenging, and what was really good for me with this one was that I was there with all of these doctors, all of these consultants, and could discuss these things with them as we went. I think if you'd been a medical student there almost alone, or maybe even just with other medical students, that would probably have been a more challenging experience. There are lots of positive sides to it as well, but mine was not really like a super fun elective, but still very good, and I'd recommend it, and I'd do it again, but I think 4 weeks is probably enough. So, sorry to be a downer as well, but I think it's important to consider that side of it as well. And that's why I was interested to see this article was published this week, International Medical Electives Undertaken by Australian Medical Students, Current Trends and Future Directions. And at least two of these authors are medical students involved with AMSA Global Health, and one's a Dean of Medicine at Flinders University. I'd suggest that you might like to Google it. This is one of the open access articles, so you don't even need to log in through the library website, but you could to read it. And it just explores a little bit where Australian medical students are going on their electives, and then has some commentary as well about some suggested ways that medical schools help to prepare and assist students once they come back as well. So out of interest, who would be interested in going overseas for their elective or part of their elective? Pretty much, okay, lots. And what about a developing country? Who would quite like to do that? Okay, so about half of those would like to go overseas. That matches reasonably closely to what they found. They found that there was a higher proportion of graduate entry program students like us, 53%, who would like to go overseas for their elective, as opposed to 35% of those from universities like UNSW. And then what they found was 59% of electives undertaken by students like us were in developing countries, which is roughly, I guess, what you guys have just indicated with your hands going up in the air. But one of the conclusions that they came to was that there aren't actually very many schools in Australia which are doing pre-departure training for medical electives, certainly not many that are making it compulsory, and even fewer that are doing post-elective, I don't know if debriefing is the right word, but that's the general idea. So I think one of the things that will be interesting to see how electives evolve, particularly for those of you who are in first and second year. It's great to see how many of them there are tonight here. I think this might be the trend. It's been seen in Canada, and there's some talk now about it happening in Australia. On reflection after my elective, I think that's a really good idea. And even after listening to some of the presentations tonight, you know, even in America, you can come up with these challenges about someone's intoxicated, fantastic opportunity to practice your suturing skills. How do you navigate the way of doing that in the way that's both ethically responsible to the patient as well as a good learning experience for you? And I'd suggest they're both reconcilable, but it would be good for people to consider doing that in advance. And of course, AMSA has a policy on that as well, which I was pleased to see. Freya let me know about that. So last one, which is a little bit more positive, although still not the loveliest photos. Medical question. This is a guy who came in to see us, a 39-year-old man who'd had this problem with his eye for some time, and on broader inspection, had these funny things on his legs as well. So I just wondered whether anyone would like to hazard a guess as to what was wrong with him. Yes, you're right. And what are these then on the legs? Yeah, this is pretibial myxedema, which is actually quite different to what I'd seen in the odd photo here and never really seen in a patient. The presentation was quite gross. Interestingly, with this one, we weren't quite sure what to do. I sent an email to an endocrinologist here, and that was actually quite helpful in providing some suggestions as to how to deal with it. And he was quite definitive in the diagnosis of hypothyroidism, and thought this was quite a classic case of pretibial myxedema. So great chance to bolster your medical knowledge, but difficult as well because, again, with this patient, he needs chronic treatment for his hypothyroidism. That was being done really, really badly there despite his multiple presentations to hospital, and it wouldn't have been that difficult for a GP or someone to manage him here, but those services just don't exist in the community there. So challenging for me as a medical student as well to know what my role would be there, and even if I worked through all of his books with the nurses and worked out what was going wrong and spoke to a consultant here and got some good advice, not being able to be there to follow through and not having doctors there that you could trust would be able to follow through with even a plan, which is not ideally provided either when it's just an email opinion, was really difficult. But great experience, and so I would encourage you, if you do still want to do part of your elective in a developing country, to do that. Just think carefully about where you go, make sure that you've thought about it in advance as well, and that you've either got people who are good to talk to about the experience while you're there, or once you get home as well, pending probably also some changes to the support that's generally provided to medical students. Thanks.
Okay, so if everyone wants to move outside now, there's some more drinks and food, and you can ask some more questions. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the presenters as well. Okay.
Cool. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you for coming and stepping in at the last minute as well, Ben.
Oh, no, you're welcome.